This podcast is a casual conversation about mental health. All topics discussed are based on our own personal opinions and should not be interpreted as professional advice. If you need assistance with your mental health, please contact a healthcare provider.
I'm overstimulated, expect the long-awaited abolition of my brain.
But if mentally we synchronize, despite what we despise, there's a chance that maybe I won't go insane. Hi, friends.
Hello.
And John. Hello, John.
Oh, friends and me separately. Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
I didn't mean it like
Hey, all of you that I'm friends with and everyone that I like. And also, hey, John.
Hey, John.
Hey. How's it going?
I just try to make sure people know who you are,
Yeah, no, of course. I just want to say hello to everyone out there, everyone that I really deeply care about that's here with me right now and that's listening, and I love you all so much. Also, Emily, hello. How are you?
I'm just peachy.
Oh, peachy keen. Glad to hear it.
Yes. Anyway, welcome to Mental Sync, the only show where we try to process our trauma without paying for it.
Yeah, without paying for it. That is the key.
Anyway, trigger warning. This episode will discuss topics like death, grief, and dying. And if you don't want to hear us talk about that, you don't have to. Turn off the podcast
totally
now.
Now.
Right now.
Oh, man. It's so weird to be bringing up a topic that's serious and we start the episode with us like laughing and giddy.
I know.
We're talking and it's like, all right, let's talk about death and loss. And
sadness.
Lots of other fun things and sad things.
Well, that's what this podcast is for for us to have an open discussion about some serious stuff, but in a very lighthearted way so it doesn't get too heavy. So
yeah, it's I think in the quest toward in the journey of normalizing mental health discussion and mental health behavior, I think a lot of it is talking about things like loss.
Yes.
As something that happens, and it's okay to feel a little not lighthearted about literal like people dying, but it's
how about
it's
more comfortable with just having an open conversation about it.
That's the wording. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
I should probably let you talk for more of this so that I don't get in trouble. Because I never want to come across as insensitive.
No, and I think this is a perfect example of why this is a hard conversation to bring up, right? Like if you think about, when you find out like a coworker's relative has died, you're like, what do I say? Like, how do I handle this? And I think it's definitely a topic that's hard to talk about because you don't know how sensitive the other person is going to be to the topic because it's just it just varies for everybody. I mean, everyone has varying experiences with death and loss.
Yeah, and then as the person, which I can speak to more, is like being around people who have, being more of the support system to those going through loss and grief. I have often found it very hard in the past to not feel like, oh, I want to put this person in a good mood. I want to, same way that I used to try to solve other problems is like, oh, this person's upset. Let me lighten the mood. Let me make them feel better. And, that's not always what people want. And that's not always what people need.
And I think it's important to like understand too, that it's okay to ask your friends, like if they're going through something like this, like, hey, like, do you need anything? But if they say no and just like don't have any requests, I think it's good to just let it be, because I know when I've experienced some pretty significant losses, I've been like, people are like, what do you need? What do you want? How can I help you? And I'm like, honestly, I just kind of want to like sit down and watch a movie in silence. So if you want to join me and not talk about anything, that's cool. But like, I don't want to talk about this, and you deserve the respect to not have to talk about it if you don't want to. But I do encourage you when you're comfortable to talk about it because it helps us process these kinds of things better.
Yeah, of course. But everyone's going to do it at their own speed, too.
Yeah. So I think for this episode,
it can be really overstimulating also. Yeah. I just want to say it can be overstimulating to be working through those thoughts and, like off of what you were saying, like being someone that's being very, what do you need? Let me help you. I want to help you. Can actually just really hurt the other person more than help them. And
I think too, like with these types of situations, I think it also it's hard because it's like, well, you know, you're not trying to hurt that other person's feelings when you're trying to help, and I think
Oh,
they
of
do. I
course.
think they do understand that, but sometimes it's just really hard when that's all you're hearing because like it's like every day, especially if it's something that was unexpected. People are like, "Oh my god, how are you holding up? Are you okay? Are you?" And it's like, I don't even want to talk about this right now.
It's
I wanted
like,
to go get ice cream. You want to come? Like,
yeah.
and we all have our own ways of handling it. So, I figured a good way to kind of introduce this topic is to share some personal experiences,
Yeah.
and just kind of talk about like the different types of losses. So, because obviously, like when you have like a grandparent or someone who's older or sick and you know that they're terminal and you know that they're going to you know die sometime soon, um it doesn't invalidate the feelings you have, but it's definitely a different feeling than a tragic random
Oh, yeah.
like loss. But I guess since this whole conversation is essentially about like grief, and so before I get into all of that, I'd like to know, I'm going to ask you, what is, yeah, let's see what you know. What is the definition of grief?
The definition of grief. Well, according to Webster's dictionary, which I'm not looking at, grief is. We've talked about this, and I've literally guessed the definition correctly, but I didn't remember it.
So
I want to
just say
say
what you feel then. What do you think
right.
grief is?
So when I think of grief, I think of it as um, processing loss,
Yes.
usually related to death.
Mhm.
Correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
it can be so grief, you can experience grief for someone or something or even a situation. So I think it's important to know too that like a lot of the time when we talk about when we're grieving, it's definitely um in relation to probably losing someone.
Hmm.
But it's a feeling, it's an internal feeling. And there's actually like a difference between grieving and mourning. And I bring that up because it's a little bit different than that those internal feelings of grief. So I want to know, what do you think? What do you think mourning is?
Oh,
Because this is
I did
actually
not.
something I
I
recently learned. So
Yeah, I did not know that there was a difference between grief and mourning. I guess if I had to guess, I would say grief is probably more long term, and that mourning is more of the. When I think of mourning versus grief, like how I would use each of those, I would say like immediately after the instance, I'd say I'm in mourning, like when you're most directly affected by it, it's most heavily on your mind. And not to say that it won't, but I feel like when it's on your mind in the future, like a little more separated from the event, maybe that's grief. I don't know.
so
No, no, I just got it wrong.
yeah, no, incorrect, wrong. Um, Mourning is our way of expressing our grief. So like,
Interesting.
so you can say someone's more like, let's say, um, you know, let's say I just found out about something and I'm grieving it, but now I'm crying, right? I'm mourning. Like the crying is that action of expressing, like the outward expression.
Oh,
So like I'm I'm mourning in that moment.
oh,
So I don't think it's a
okay.
really like super important like I don't really
Yeah,
think anybody really
I
needs
know
to
what you
know
mean.
that, but I mean, I just thought it was interesting because I didn't realize when I looked this up that there was a difference.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting because I've thought of both as being the same thing, but yeah, no, I think it
Yeah.
is helpful
So
to
like
know the distinction.
yeah, so like mourning, an example of like just to give a few more examples, like an example of mourning would be like talking about the person who died, like that's mourning.
Hmm.
Crying, uh I don't know.
The method you're saying, the method
Yeah,
of
so
with
even
which
like
you're dealing with your grief.
right, so even if you were to celebrate like anniversaries of like a death, like not celebrate, but like notice, that's
Oh
mourning, right?
yeah,
Like being like, oh,
yeah.
today's the day X person, died,
Hmm.
and I think that is also an example of mourning. So yeah, the more you
Very
know.
interesting. The more you know.
I think it's good to kind of share personal experiences because I think it'll be easy for people to relate to that, especially people who've
Yeah,
experienced different types of losses.
And you have definitely, between the two of us, definitely experienced more losses in your life separate from a grandparent or a
Yes. Yes.
an elder person. So
Yes.
yeah, if you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I the first person I've ever lost was my meme, my dad's mom.
Mm,
And she passed away when I was probably like 7. I think I was like 7. And it was very different at the time because I knew she was also sick. Like I knew she was sick. I knew she wasn't doing well. But I also didn't like comprehend really what that meant. Like I knew that like people when they get older or they're sick, they might like die, but I don't think I ever like processed that in that kind of a way because it never really affected me um a lot like growing up. Like it was kind of more of like a thing that just happened and we accepted it and we moved on. And I do think that that's in relation to my age, but I also think it's in relation to the relationship I had with her. And that being said, like since I was very young, we just kind of like visited with her. I didn't really have like a very strong like she lived in a different town, you know, like I didn't see her every day. Like
yeah.
my mom's parents live like literally like 6 houses down technically from us. So they were like very much so like actively in our life, like coming over all the time, and we were going to see them, and they had a pool and we'd go and swim in their pool. And then my meme, of course, when we were younger, she lived in a like in a condo and didn't like have like when you would go there you knew she wasn't feeling well, and you didn't have like it wasn't to go and play, you know what I mean, like it wasn't to go and be like,
Right.
so it was more so like, oh, we have
Interesting.
to go see meme because she's not doing well, and you know
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But so that was the first person I've lost. And that was, again, that was something I never really processed. Like I definitely feel like today, now I'm kind of like, oh, I wish she was here to like, well, because I'm getting married in September, so I kind of wish she was here to be there at the wedding, and like I think she would enjoy that. And that's kind of a grief I feel around like her. Like I kind of feel like I'm missing out on those moments with my dad's mom.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that's very interesting to me. It's interesting to watch how we kind of deal with that, especially when it happens when we're like at that age, or very young. Because I do have memories of her. I could tell you her entire house. She had these like magnets on her fridge, like millions of magnets, like so many magnets, and they
Yeah.
were all like shaped like they were like 3D magnets. Like one would be like of a toaster, and like she had bread and like bananas and an oven, and it was
So
like,
cute.
like the one thing I would do every time I'd go over there, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to the fridge. Like
Going to the fridge, playing
I'm
with the
I'm
magnets.
gonna go play with magnets. It's fine.
Yeah. No,
um,
that's the stupid shit that you remember. I mean, my grandpa had he had a little little ball pit set up.
it's awesome.
Uh it was cool. Yeah, he filled up like a kiddie pool with like the little ball pit balls.
Yeah.
And so the cousins and I would just go down there and we'd play like save the drowning person.
Yeah.
And one time that was me. I was the drowning person and all the cousins pulled me out and broke my wrist.
Oh, what a fun
But
game.
what a fun game. Yeah, we stopped after
We
that.
said that was the last. That was the
That
last
was
time
the
you played
last
the
of
game.
it. Um but before we move on from Meme, could you talk about how you are uh involving her in your wedding? Because I know
Yes.
that and I think it's really sweet.
Yeah. So I since I'm someone who has experienced a lot of loss, and I want to be able to have, air quotes if you can't see me and you're just listening, air quotes, have them there. I am creating a memory table for all my loved ones who have passed. And the picture of my meme is with her and her well, her husband at the time, Gary, because he also passed. But again, he was someone, he passed when I was older, but he had like, he was sick, so we knew it was like he
Right.
was terminally ill. Like the moment he found out his diagnosis, we knew he wasn't going to live very long. But anyway, so I have a picture of them at their wedding that I'm putting in a
That's sweet.
frame and putting on like a little table so that I can have like, like little pictures of all of these people, so they can technically, in a way, in my own mind, it makes me feel better to have them like there, again, air quotes if you can't
Yeah.
see me. um but yeah, so I'm doing that for everyone. I printed out really nice quality pictures of everyone, and I'm putting them in these really nice frames, and then I have a dedicated space on my wall for after my wedding where I'm going to make like a little like collage of photos for everyone. So I think that'll be cute.
That's super
um
cute.
But yeah, so that's kind of how I'm incorporating that into my wedding, because as I do go through different life events, I definitely feel like these losses pretty heavy, especially so my cousin passed away in a car accident when she was 17 and I was 12. And then about a year later, my
Right.
aunt, her mom, died of lung cancer. So we knew that she was going to die at some point. She was terminally ill. Um, so yeah, so when they passed away, I was like 12, and my cousin, she was my best friend. And what I struggle with today the most is, again, those feelings of like, oh, we were going to do this when I got married. And we talked about like
Yeah.
these plans. And I was really looking forward to doing this with her. And even the more immediate plans, right? Like right before she died, she was like, she died in the summer. She was like, this winter, I'm going to take you and we're going to go to like this mountain and go snowboarding together. And I was like, oh, I can't wait. Like, that's going to be so fun. Cause it was like right after she got her license and she could like drive us
Yeah.
everywhere. And it was so fun to like plan out those little things with her. Um, so that one was really hard for me to get through, and that one was tragic and sudden and totally random, and that like ripped my whole world apart, right? Like my best friend.
Yeah.
I mean, your cousins are some of your best friends in some circumstances.
Oh yeah. Definitely the case for me too.
And I have a small family, so she is pretty much one of my only cousins that I'm like I was very close to at the time. And I mean my aunt and her, they were at like everything. We had these big gatherings with everybody in our family coming to like Thanksgiving and Christmas and birthdays, and that was always really fun. But after she died and then after my aunt died that year later, um things kind of slowed down for us around like holidays, and I now kind of have a different feeling about holidays. They went from being this big, like, oh my God, I can't wait to see Aunt Val and I can't wait to see Allison um and all the other family members who would come with that. And then like people just kind of like dispersed, right? Like there was a lot of like division within the family in that sense. Like all of a sudden people weren't around as much anymore. And like now holidays are still just pretty much my grandparents and then, my mom and dad and my two siblings. And that kind of hurts sometimes, like to think about all the times we
Yeah.
had all these people over from our family, and then now no longer does that really ever happen. So again, like that is a different type of loss. It's a very sudden, unexpected loss, and that was very difficult for me to process. Um,
Right, especially as someone young, because you are so used to, like you were saying, of course all grief is valid. Like, and every death hits differently. But when someone's older, what you're kind of told as a child is like, oh, they got older, and when you get older, you do eventually die, and it's like still hard to process.
yeah,
But there's more of an understanding of, oh, this is far, far away. This
yes,
is a long, long time away. And then to go from that to realizing that it just kind of happens and it
yes.
can just happen to anyone at any time
Hmm.
is very scary and shakes your worldview and makes you grow up a little faster than
Well, yeah, and
would have been preferred.
especially at 12, right? Like at 12, that's
Yeah.
a very important age developmentally
Oh,
for us. Like we're
yeah.
trying to fit in. You're trying to fit in when you're 12, trying to make friends,
You're
you're trying to go do a bunch of
finding
random things.
Right. You're finding the
Um,
beginning of your like real personality.
yes,
Like,
and like your
I
social
mean, not
life.
really, but like yeah, the
You're like
beginning of your
trying
teenage
Yeah, and
years.
you're really trying to develop who you are as like an individual, because you
Yeah.
become more independent around that age. Like your mom lets you walk to the bus stop by yourself, like random,
Whoa.
like,
Yeah.
you know
Just
um
little things that make you feel like you have a little more autonomy over your life,
yeah,
and it's really hard to drop something like that on
yeah.
someone
and
going through that.
and I remember even like it affected me. I mean, it still affects me today, but I really lived in that day for like the next 5 to 6 years. um
Man.
and I just felt sad all the time, and while all my friends wanted to go out and do this and have fun doing that, and maybe we can go here and make these plans, I was like, I just kind of want to stay inside because I'm sad. Like
Yeah.
I didn't really know how to like process that, and it got to a point where one day my mom was like, okay, so Emily's not doing great. We have to figure something out. And so she got me to go to therapy, and I started working on all those things, and kind of built up these tools that I've been using even to this day, that when I start to struggle with just like these ideas of these losses, I pretty much implement them still. And I'll get
Yeah.
into those, in a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. I want to hear about those.
yeah. But the other things I'd like to talk about, because I've like I think sudden losses are interesting because you can have something like a car accident, right? Like
Hmm.
my cousin, and then you could have something like like that's a freak accident, but an even freakier accident is like um a friend of mine, a family friend of ours actually. He was driving home from work one day and he was like stopped at a light and there was like a thunderstorm and the tree that was next to him at the light got struck by lightning
Yeah,
and the tree
that's right.
fell on his car and killed him instantly, and that was like a real like you could literally die at any moment for me. Like that's what that was
Yeah.
like. Not that I didn't know that already because I've already at that point I was 20. That was only a couple years ago. It was like
It just
22.
becomes so much more prevalent in your world. Like it becomes
Yes.
such a, when it happens to people you're that close to, it just feels closer, because
Yes.
it's kind of like how you hear about natural disasters and you hear about like shootings and very, very unfortunate things, and they're scary, but there's a huge difference between hearing about something that happens in another country or even in your country and on
Right.
another, like
It's
in
like you're
another time
removed.
zone.
It's like
But
you're removed
when
from it.
yeah, but then when you learn like, oh, there was a shooting like on my block, or
Mhm.
like, or honestly even worse than that, I would say, someone that I'm incredibly close to and am in regular contact with
Yeah.
just died, and it's
And it's so I don't even know what the word for that is. It's so like surprising, I guess is the only word I can think of because
I'm sure.
like in those moments, obviously like after my cousin died so young, I was like, "Oh my god, we can all die at any point. Like anybody can die. If someone's going to die, they might just die. Like we're not promised tomorrow." Like that
Yeah.
was kind of that
Yeah.
awakening for me around that. But when my friend
Especially when I know you already said this, but being like 12 years old and developing your personality,
yes.
when you're like, oh, who am I as a person, and then that is one of the major things going on in your brain, you're like, oh, that's what kind of person I am. Like that just kind of sets itself in as like, I'm a person that's constantly thinking about death and
Yes.
constantly worried about death, and oh god, it's
Yeah,
awful.
and
I'm so
honestly, I'm
sorry.
still like experiencing the effects of loss today. Like
Yeah.
I was pretty much diagnosed with PTSD around all of this. And in not such a severe way, but in a way that like I'm very still X amount of time removed, very emotional about it. And not to say that grief ever just like goes away. But just
No.
it's the intensity of the grief that's what's not normal, again air
Hmm.
quotes if you can't see me. I know I'm using air
I
quotes
mean,
so many
yeah.
times today. But like for so I once saw this little drawing about grief that I really appreciated because it really drives home the point for me about like what grief is and how we all grow with grief. And it's this clear like mason jar, and inside the mason jar there's a little black ball, and that little black ball is grief, and the mason jar is you. And as you go on with your life and you grow up and you continue on your life path, your jar gets bigger, but that ball stays exactly the same. So it's
Oh,
never that
I love that.
our grief shrinks, it's that we grow
Hmm.
around it. So we learn how to
Right.
kind of deal with it better, we learn how to process it a little bit better. But it really does stay with you your entire life.
Yeah, but hopefully becomes a little bit
Little
less like potent.
Yes, it's not taking up as much space in your jar,
Yeah.
right? Like your jar is so much bigger and it's still there, it hasn't changed, but it just doesn't take up as much of your time and your energy anymore, hopefully.
Yeah.
Um so that's kind of how, it feels for me at least when I saw that. I was like that is like the perfect explanation of how I feel. um so yeah, so there's that. And I also think like you have like I so like with that friend specifically, when he passed away, like I said earlier, when I was 12, I realized, oh my god, like people just randomly die, like people, anyone can die. But at 22, I was like, oh my god, like it's gonna storm tomorrow. Like if I'm driving home, this could happen to me,
Oh
which
God.
which
Yeah.
is technically like an anxiety about it, but I'm not saying that in a way where I was like really focused on that, but it was that realization of like, no, we literally are not promised the next 10 minutes of our life. Like something could
Yep.
happen on my drive home. Um, so I
Well, that's
just think
something
it's
I think
like,
a lot of people can really relate to, especially post the COVID quarantine. Not that we're past the pandemic by any means, but
right.
we're definitely past that first initial pre-vaccination phase of, I mean, I know amongst my friends and I living in New York, especially, we were like, this could be life or death.
Yeah.
Like, we're young and healthy, but I'm also immunocompromised. Both of my parents have diabetes. uh, I have exercise induced asthma, and so does my brother. And there are just all these little things where it's like, I wasn't thinking like, oh, I think someone near me or around me is going to die. I'm very, very fortunate to not have lost anyone due to COVID. But I'm sure a lot of people are, I think something as a world like all of humanity kind of had to stop and realize was like, we got to man, I don't know, we're just not promised, like you've been saying, we're not promised the next day.
Right.
It was this real, I think, shake
Yeah.
that freaked me out, freaked
Yeah.
I think everyone out
I
a
think
little
so
bit.
too. I definitely I actually ended up getting COVID, and that
Yeah.
entire time I was deathly afraid of potentially dying because I have a couple complications that they were like when I called my doctor to tell him I had COVID, he was like, "No, that's not good." I was like, "I feel okay right now," and then it progressively got worse for me.
God.
And I don't want to
Yeah.
turn this into a COVID podcast because I could go on forever about how
Nah,
terrifying that all was. But
we'll get off that bullshit.
but anyway, and I guess like there's definitely more people in my life that I've lost, but I wanted to bring him up specifically because another thing about that was that he had passed away because, I mean, not that he had passed away because, I meant to say like when he passed away, my little sister was closer to him, and um she was grieving herself, but also, he has a younger sister who she's very, very close with, one of her best friends, and now she's watching her best friend grieve her brother, and her best friend's mom, who's a close friend of the family, grieve her son. Same thing with the dad, obviously, and then she's also grieving his loss, and she's trying to be a support for them while she's also like, oh my god, what just happened? You know what I mean? Like it's like
Yeah.
it was very interesting to like watch her go through that, because even though she had lost my aunt and my cousin when we were younger, we're 5 years apart. She was only 7. So she was the age that I was when I lost my meme. So not to say it doesn't affect her, but again, I don't think at that age you really process it in the same way that you would when you're 12 or 15 or 20 or
Right.
um so I had technically at that point really hadn't seen her grieve like that. And then unfortunately she has experienced a lot of losses with her friends. Just like really terrible freak timing things as well. So I've watched her grieve through that. And that's difficult. It's difficult to watch someone you love like grieve. Well, I
Yeah.
guess mourn. I
Mourn.
guess
Right.
technically it's difficult to watch someone mourn. And and the other reason I bring her up is because I think a good thing to get into this episode is about like helping your friends who might be grieving, because not only had I dealt with like my sister who was grieving, I was also dealing like with my mom who was grieving at the time, who lost her sister and her niece, and like then there's my grandma who lost her daughter. Like it just is this, it doesn't just affect you. And I bring that up because Victor is someone who hadn't lost anybody yet in his life. Like he had never
Hmm.
experienced like a death. So while he is empathetic with what I'm going through, and he wants to be there for me, he never really understood it. And then unfortunately, one of his close friends passed away, because she overdosed, and
That's tough. That's
I
really,
had
really
to
tough.
not only experience him experiencing grief for the first time and loss, I had to also help him through losing his best friend. And that was so hard to like go through on that other end, and I didn't know what to do for him because I'm like, oh my god, he's never lost anybody. Where I'm like, oh yeah, like it happens. Like I'm like, I'm like,
Right.
I have experience in this.
You're a
Like
veteran in this
I
area.
I know I know how this
Oh,
I know how this feels, and it was just hard because he was like, this is like that's the worst thing that ever happened to him in his adult life in that sense, you know.
yeah, I'm sure.
So I also think there's struggle around the way that she passed because there's like a drug issue there, you know, and I also bring that up because I recently, back in November, I think it was like November, I found out that one of my close childhood friends had overdosed and passed away. And I found out like 7 months after it actually happened because he was in rehab. And I there was a period of time where I really hadn't talked to him in a long time, you know,
Right.
and when I found out months later, it was because I went to go like message him on Facebook to be like, "Oh, hey, like I was just thinking about you. You know, like how is everything going?" And then of course, when I opened his Facebook, all I saw was like the, "Oh my god, dude, can't believe it. Like rest in
Oh my
peace,
god.
blah blah blah
How
blah blah."
long after like how long ago were the posts from when
So
you
he died
messaged?
in May.
Oh my
So they
god.
were from May, and I found out in November.
That's hard.
Yeah, May, June, July,
Wow.
August, September, October, November. Yeah, so like 6 months prior to me finding out.
That's hard because like what do you know, cuz I don't know, my first thought would be to like reach out to the family and be like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry." But like that's so far after
Yes,
the event
that's
happened. It's like
ex-
what's
exactly what went through my brain. I was
yeah,
like,
like
how
what's
on earth?
appropriate? What is it nice to bring that up again? Do we not want to
S-
talk about that?
So
Like
yeah, so what I did, and I don't know if there's a right or wrong way to do this, but my first thing was like, oh my god, how did he die? Because my first suspicion was obviously that he overdosed because I knew about his
right,
history.
because yeah.
And so I like stalked his Facebook to see who, if anybody like leaked a little bit of extra information, immediately went on his Instagram, which he was
I
never
think that
active
makes
on.
sense. I
Yeah.
think that makes sense to, first attempt being, let me try to not bring this up to anyone if I don't have to, because
Yeah.
I'm sure it's still, very raw,
Yes.
despite it being
Um
6 months later.
and so what had happened after that was I didn't find any like inside information on it other than that people were saying like, can't believe you went this way, like I'm so sorry, and I'm like, what way what way did this happen? And so I then, of course, like Googled his obit and everything. And when that got brought up, um, there was obviously no information. But like in some obits, they'll be like, oh, there was like an accident, or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
sometimes it says like things like that. So I was like, maybe there's information in there. And then I sat on it by myself for like a month and was like, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm just gonna like try to figure out, maybe potentially find something, like whatever. And then one day I was like, it was really kind of eating at me that I didn't know. And I felt like out of the loop almost. And like I was hurting and I just needed some sort of closure of like knowing
Right.
what
Like what
happened.
happened?
And so,
Because you can't really process it
right. Cause I felt like
thoroughly
I was
without
like,
knowing that.
yeah, that's how I felt at least. I was like, I don't know how to, like, what? Like, what happened? And so I went back onto his Facebook and found someone who was like, "Oh my god, we were just together like 5 days ago. I miss you so much." And I reached out to them and was like, "Hey, I am like a really close friend of this person. Like I grew up with them. Um I'm a friend of the family and I have been out of the loop for so long. Mind you, his family had moved down to Florida a while ago. So
Hmm.
like it's not like I saw him frequently at all, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, I was wondering if you knew like what happened. And she told me, and then I was like, okay, now what do I do with this information? Right? Because I'm like, what do I do? Do I message
Right.
his mom who practically raised me as a child? Like, do I message her and say, hey,
That's
like,
tough. I don't know.
but what I feel like I kind of lucked out because she bought something off of my Etsy like one day. And so I
Okay.
used
So the
that into as like an intro into me like saying something about it. So I was like, "Hey,
That's
thank
smart.
you so much, for your purchase. Like I just shipped it out today. Also I just found out about, the whole situation, and I just wanted to say I'm so sorry for your loss."
Yeah.
And like just I just had that kind of a conversation with her, and funny enough is I have a voicemail from him and my aunt that have stayed on my phone forever. Like I have a voicemail from my aunt from 2009. No,
Wow.
2008.
Oh my god.
2008. I think it's 2008. I'm going to check because I'd like to know the actual date. Yeah, December 2008. And then in March
Wow.
of 2009, I was like going through my voicemails the other day. There was like an unrecognized number, like because I bet you from that time is, I think this might have been their home phone, like their home phone number. Like this is
Oh man, that's
2009.
wild. So
And
yep.
I didn't know what it was, and it's like literally right above my aunt's voicemail.
Oh,
And I was like, "What is this?" So I clicked on it, and it's a voicemail from him.
wow.
And I was like, "What?" So I mentioned that to her. I was like, "I have a voicemail from him from 2009 on my phone." And she was like, "Oh my god." She's like, "At least you can hear his voice. Like I haven't heard his voice in so long." And so I obviously
Of
downloaded it and I
course.
sent it to
Oh,
her. And she
that's
was
so
like
sweet.
so thankful. She was
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
"Thank you
that's
so
wonderful.
much." So I was glad that I kind of found a way to like ease into that conversation.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there was any like right or wrong way to go. It
No.
was totally like, how is this going to play out? And it's really nice that that played out in a way where, you didn't have to like bring it like, I
Yeah.
know what you mean, where it was nicer probably to have a reason to be talking to her
Yes.
anyways, and then to kind of say like, oh, and by the way, I never got to say this to you, as
Yes.
opposed to like reaching out at what might be a time that she's not
Yes.
trying to
And
talk to
that was
anyone.
my biggest concern too, is like
Yeah.
if I randomly reach out to her, what if like she's like really going through it right now? Like I would feel so bad
Yeah.
to bring up this kind of a like trauma again for her. Like I don't know her mental
Yeah.
state right
Which,
now.
that wouldn't be your fault. It's just you never know.
Right, right.
I know we wanted to get into today, and talking about the different feelings that you can feel when processing grief, especially when they feel maybe a little bit inappropriate, which can lead to some guilt. If you don't mind me talking about my
No,
experience for a second
absolutely.
before we really get into that, but because I haven't lost too many people very close to me, but I've lost all my grandparents at this point. My mom's mom passed away before I was even born. My mom was, I want to say, 18 when she passed away, and I know that's still affecting her very much, very actively.
Absolutely.
Um, my grandpa has remarried a couple times, and the grandma that I knew growing up um, passed away when I was, the number seven, like 7 years old is in my head, but I don't think that's right. I think I was in like third or fourth grade, so like 8 or 9 maybe. But that was the first death in the family that I had ever experienced, and I remember very clearly. I had no idea that she was sick. I still to this day don't really know if she was sick or like what exactly happened. But I mean, I assume she was sick because she passed away in her sleep, from what I was told. But I was on my way to the hospital to get like a cast off or something, and then my mom said like, just so you know, Grandma Brenda died earlier this morning. She passed away, and I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. And I remember being affected by that and just kind of being like it was a, I still understood it in a, oh, she's older and that's what happens
Right,
when
right,
you're
right.
older kind of sense, but she wasn't like that old. I don't remember how old she was, but I want to say she was like 70 something.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, it was strange to me, but I don't remember thinking too much about it in my life.
Right.
And then my pop, my dad's dad, uh we were visiting him as he was getting sicker, and so that was something we were a little more ready for. And then he passed away. I want to say I was like a preteen or like early teenager, um, which also, it's not that it didn't affect me. We just, with my grandma on my mom's side and with my pop, I loved them as a member of my family, but we didn't have a super super personal relationship. like we had a like grandparent grandchild relationship like in general, but
Mhm.
we didn't have a lot of like super specific like one-on-one memories, which isn't a bad thing. That was just
Yeah.
that's just what it was.
Matter
We
of
had,
fact, yeah.
I had a bigger family, so there were a lot of grandkids.
Yeah.
But then the first death that actually I think has affected me a little bit more is my nana, who was my dad's mom, who passed away in the summer of 2019. And we were very ready for that. Christmas Eve the previous year, we went and visited her, and it was the first time of realizing, like, oh, like Nana's not herself anymore. Nana that we know is kind of gone, and she, this person is still alive, but she's confused about who's in the room with her, and she's, um
Yes.
as soon as she realized who we were, she was very, very happy to see us and was very, very sweet, and would actually remember out of the blue, would like not quite realize who was in the room with her, but then in realizing it was us, would ask about like, and moved to New York and was asking about like film work and stuff for me, and
Yeah.
theater for Liv, and it was really, really touching. And she was someone that I definitely had specific memories of.
Yeah.
I had a relationship with her as I was getting older, where we would both start like teasing my dad together, and
Right.
she would come to every single one of our shows, Lives in my shows, every single one, and told me that that I needed to hurry up and get an Oscar, because she wanted to see me win an Oscar, which was very sweet. And yeah, that definitely was a bit of an effect of just kind of like, I'm not down on myself for not winning an Oscar by 26.
Well, why not? You
But
should
it
work
was
harder.
but it was sad to kind of be like, oh, like there are a lot of times where I'm making like still great advances in my career, and I'm just kind of like, wish I could tell Nana that. I
Yeah.
wish I wish she
Ugh.
knew about that.
Yes, I experienced that on a
And
daily
it's,
basis, that feeling of like, oh, I wish I could
yeah.
share this with them, or oh my god, this person would love this, and I totally.
Yeah, and so she passed away then, and then my grandpa, my mom's dad, just passed away in January of this year, and similar kind of thing where we had more of a one-on-one relationship, and like even as he was forgetting things, he was still asking about film work, and
Yeah.
I was excited to hear about my television jobs and stuff like that, and it was very sweet, and something that we have talked about before, not on the podcast officially, on
Officially.
our deleted episode because it got all messed up.
Ugh.
So sad. That's the other
Technology.
grief I'm processing.
I mean, you could be. You could be. I mean, I was.
That's true.
I was. I got
Fair.
over it pretty
That's
quick.
fair.
But I was very upset when I found out that we had to
Woo.
re-record these.
Oh man, that was actually a flip situation where you were like, our material went away, like the stuff that we worked really hard on, like it's gone now. And me being an experienced film person was just like, that was, I think, not at all similar to
Yeah.
experiencing death and going through
Yeah.
death, but that was kind of the flip situation where I was the one that was like, yeah, these things happen. Sometimes you work really, really hard on your footage, and then you didn't format the SD card, or the Wi-Fi
Big
doesn't work,
sad.
and it just all goes away.
And I was like, big
Oof.
sad.
But all of this said, something that I experienced that I know we've talked about, was this weird sense of almost positivity at, I remember specifically at my Nana's wake. And I felt very guilty about that because I didn't understand it, because I was sad. I remember like, at one point I like went to the bathroom and just like cried for a second, and then I knew it'd feel better if I just kind of like looked at some pictures of her. And um but it was a very, I don't know, I didn't feel like she was like, I know the way I'm sure it feels when it's really a surprise is that this person was like ripped away from you and you didn't get that closure. I very much felt like I did have closure, and I got to see her as, toward the end of her life, and I kind of got to like say goodbye and feel like we were just waiting for her to pass. So it wasn't, I wasn't a wreck.
Right.
But just felt this real sense of positivity, and I couldn't quite understand why. Just like relief for one thing, which,
Yeah, so I think that's, I mean, I just think that that's so valid, right? Like
yeah,
especially
yeah,
when
I know that
someone's,
now.
yeah, when someone's suffering, it's almost like, oh, like I'm going to miss them dearly, but like I'm so glad that they're in a better place and they're not hurting anymore, and like,
Yeah.
yeah, is
I don't
struggling
want
with
them to be
something.
living this way. I
Right.
don't want them to be in pain, and I don't want, that man.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah, it's
I mean,
sad.
I can, I've had many. There's many feelings around grief, like anger. Like I can tell you that my friend
Mhm.
that just passed, I was kind of angry. Like why? You know, like in a
I'm
sense, it's like
sure. Yeah.
why did you have to do that? But it's like again, like not blaming him or anything, but that feeling of like, oh, I'm so mad that this is what happened to you. You know, like it's that like
Yeah, for a lot
weird,
of reasons, I'm sure
yeah, and
that like
so there's like so many things you can go through, and I've definitely like when my aunt died, as sad as it was, it was just as riveting as my cousin, because again my aunt was very young when she died.
mhm.
But she there was a point where I remember when she just got very, very sick. I mean, she was in hospice and like couldn't take care of herself, and my mom and my grandmother couldn't take care of her anymore either. It was just too dangerous for her well-being, you know. And I remember thinking like the moment that she died, like when that, well, actually when that transition happened to her in hospice, I was thinking, "Oh no, this sucks for her." You know, like so when she did die, I was kind of like, well, at least like she's not in pain, she's not
Yeah, the pain is
struggling,
over.
you know? So
It's
there is a sense of relief sometimes with that, and I feel like you shouldn't feel guilty about the way that you feel after processing death in that way.
yeah, I think that's one that a lot of people can like understand and relate to. Um but I also think another part of it for me was the wake was I mean, I don't know. It was so nice to see all these people that, my nana had touched,
Yeah.
that whose lives that she like positively impacted. And like, my dad, this was my dad's mom, and my dad, he's the most social person on the planet.
Right.
And so it was also all these people here to support him and like
Oh
his
yeah.
siblings. And there was just so it was a very sad circumstance and a very sad tone, but it was such a a, a, a loving environment and a supportive environment, and catching up with people that I hadn't seen in a while. And this was right before Liv and I moved to New York, and so it was a really, in a weird way, it was a great way to say goodbye to like all this extended family. And it's just like we're off to do our next part of the journey, and people were so happy for us, and there was just so much positivity. And Liv and I talk
Well,
about
yeah.
that a lot, where it's like that was just a really nice day.
Yeah, and
Um,
I can relate to that because when my cousin died, I mean, like it was like a mass of people who showed up. And they were people that not only she has touched, but my aunt, you know, people who wanted to support my aunt in that moment, and who wanted to support me. Like I had friends come, and they lived in Durham from Southington. It's like, I don't know what, like 30-40 minutes away.
People would make the journey.
Yeah, like a lot of my friends,
It's
you know, and
nice.
their parents like showed up for us, and it was really nice as we were walking out of the church. First of all, like these people were lined out to the street, like fanning out, like there was masses, like it was a mass of people, like so many people, probably like 300 to 400 people, like it was a lot of people, like, and
That's wild.
I remember seeing all these people and thinking like, oh my god, like all these people are here to like support us and to support her and to support my aunt, and that is so like, you know, and I'm experiencing this at 12. I'm like, that is something, like, you know, like
Yeah,
I didn't even know the words for how
it's
I felt
kind of
about
like
that, but
you get to see what someone made of their life
yes.
in a way. Like,
Well, even like my
yeah,
friend,
that's really
the
cool.
friend who passed away when he was driving home from work, um and this goes back to me saying like when you ask your friends about what they need, I think it's important to respect that, because they did like a candle, like a whole like candle lit ceremony for him, and his mom was just not in a place to be a part of it. It was just too much for her, which again, totally understandable.
Oh yeah.
Um, and she had let the people who organized this know, like, I really appreciate the support, and but I don't want to be actively like a part of it outside and like with everybody. But the amount of people who like their house is at the end of a cul-de-sac, and the amount of people that like filled that cul-de-sac with like candles,
So sweet.
and they lined them up from her house like to the street. They were like
Oh.
those big candles. You know what I'm talking about? Like those really
Yeah, yeah,
long
yeah. I
skinny
know what you're
candles.
talking about. The one
And
I think of them as like advent calendar or
yeah,
advent
yeah,
candles. That's
yeah.
not what they are, but that's
No.
what, yeah.
But yeah, so they lit all those candles, and then his sister and his dad came out and like thanked everybody, and she like would look from the window, to see everything that was going on out there, but she didn't want to be a part of it, and she didn't want to acknowledge it, but just people respected that she was like, no, it's
Yeah.
okay if you guys do this, but I just hope you know that I really am not in a place to be involved and outside. um and again, like
It's
with
just
everything.
knowing
Yeah,
knowing that all those people are there to support you. That's just
right.
got to feel so great.
It is. And like I think too, in my situations, those moments for me when people really respect those kind of wishes is so much better than someone who like
Oh yeah.
is like they're trying to help, so I feel bad saying that, but like who's constantly like, what do you need, what do you need, what do you need, can I help you, can I do this, I want to do this, I want to help you with this, and you're just like, I don't even know what I need. Honestly, like I said earlier, I just kind of want to go get some ice cream. You want to come? But can we not talk about this? Like, can we just
Yeah.
like
I,
because you're also trying to get back into your daily routine of like just doing normal things, and and that's very hard right after, obviously, to do. But it's like if
right.
I
And
tell you like, hey, like I kind of want to just sit in silence and like
right. And
watch a
you don't want to
movie.
yeah, and you don't want to feel like an inconvenience also to other people. Like that's a big thing where it's like on one hand you don't want to ask someone to do something because you don't want to feel like an inconvenience. On the other hand, they're like not demanding, but they're insisting that they want to help. And so you're like, I have to find a way for them to help. And that's just stress that you just don't need to be
Yeah,
dealing with. And so for the person that's trying to help, I think it's a matter of like opening the door and,
yeah, absolutely.
saying, if you need anything,
I'm here.
please let me know. Do
Yeah,
not hesitate to reach out with whatever you need. Like
right.
open the door, but don't let yourself in,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. And I think too,
Just,
like, there obviously there comes a point too where it's like concerning, right? If it's been like
yeah,
a certain
that's a
amount of
different
time and the
story.
person's like not coming out of their shell, and like things are, they're just like they've become a recluse, like maybe that's the
Mhm.
time to little push a little bit,
And
and
that
get them the
depends on
help
your
they.
relationship
Oh,
with the person
absolutely.
either,
But just
where
like,
like there is an extent I would say with you where if you were really going through something, of course I'd give you space, of course I'd say, whatever you need. But then if a lot of time passed and you were like not responding and were like in a really deep place, I might find it in myself to be like, hey, I'm gonna come through and we're gonna hang out and maybe sit in silence. But I think it's okay, like you're saying, there's a point
yes.
where and that goes with mental health across the board, where you want to give people the space that they need, but and it's hard to define because there's no clear
Yeah.
line. But there are points at times where it's like the person doesn't want help but they need it, and
Mhm.
that's the hardest stuff to navigate. I don't
Absolutely.
have advice. I don't know if I would correctly read that, but
Well, I mean, I think,
it can
we
happen.
all do our best, right? We do our best
We
to
all
help
do
the
our
people we
best.
care about and we love. And I just think I just want to drive that point home for people, like, in the beginning, like I really think it's important to respect what they want. Don't force it. You know how many
Yeah.
people are coming to them saying the same thing? Like it's
Yeah.
exhausting. But the last thing I kind of want to touch on before we wrap up, like very quickly, is just kind of like some coping mechanisms.
Hmm.
If you are going through kind of like a crisis with this, or even just like really struggling to be okay, um so first of all, if you're ever concerned about your mental health, please, please, please reach out to somebody. There are, I forgot to pull these up before the episode, so let me do that right now, but there are resources for you to call. You can text home to the number
Home.
741-741, and they will connect you with a crisis counselor. and invite you to
That's the
share.
word home, HOME.
Yes, HOME
Gotcha.
to 741-741. Because I know some people don't like
That's
to talk on the phone.
yeah, I sure don't.
Yeah, me neither. But the other number you can call, so the National Suicide Prevention Hotline does not only provide services for people who might be contemplating suicide or are in that
Mhm.
type of a crisis. They also provide support for people who need it, like just mental health wise. And the number for
Oh, that's
them,
great.
yeah, the number for them is, um, and this is in the U.S. 800-273-8255. Um,
And I'm writing that down so that I can repeat that because that was not in front of me. But just a reminder, or to repeat that, if you are in the US, that is 800-273-8255.
yes. So that being said, if you don't feel like you have anybody you can go to talk to, there's always someone to listen. I have a friend who is trained on a um a hotline for victims of like sexual assault, and one of the things that they're taught is to just they can just sit there with you. Like if you
Yeah.
call and you're just silent, they'll sit there with you until you hang up. They might ask you midway, like, "You still there?" Like that, like, and you don't have to respond per se, but um, they
Yeah,
will sit with you.
your health and safety is incredibly important, and that's why that service exists. So
Right.
if you are even contemplating, if you're even wondering like, "Oh, am I in a situation where I need to call that?" I personally would say then yeah, you probably are, and that's okay. Like that's not a
Yeah. Don't
like you were
don't be
saying,
afraid to get help.
that's not just an end all be all. I'm thinking
Yes.
of committing suicide. Like
Correct.
that is and again, apology. We gave a trigger warning at the
We
beginning,
did.
but apologies. This is very sensitive material, but if you are in any way in a place where you're even thinking about, do I need that kind of help? You probably do. You're probably in a place where that will be helpful, and that's okay. And that's
Yeah.
fine. That's what it's there for. That's a
Right.
resource. Please,
So,
please use that.
yes, please, please, please use that. Um, but that would be my first advice if you feel like you're in that type of a situation is you can always call that number even if you just honestly, even if you're struggling with it, they'll probably and they will, I think I'm pretty sure I know they will just listen to what you're going through.
Yep.
So don't be afraid. Again, don't be afraid to just reach out even if you don't think it's worth it. It is. It's
It is.
always worth
It
it.
absolutely. Your life is absolutely worth it.
Absolutely. And then the
Hands
second
down.
thing I'd like to say about that is reach out to your friends, or your family, or the people you know who care for you and that will be there for
Yeah.
you. You never have to really share anything you don't want to, but if you just need the support, like I said earlier, if you want someone to come over and sit on your couch in silence and watch TV, and you know someone who will do that for you, call them. Just
Yeah.
have someone to be there for you. Don't be afraid to reach out to your friends. They know you're not a burden when it comes to this kind of stuff.
No.
And they will 100%, if they're your real friends, be there for you no matter what. Um,
Absolutely.
so those are my two big things. Is just talk to somebody about it, please. Just talk to somebody about it. Um, but a coping mechanism that has helped me a couple of times in my life is to write a letter about my feelings and either throw it away or put it somewhere safe or rip it up or burn it or whatever you want to do with it. But that has helped me sometimes like really put those feelings, like something I wanted to say to them, like these people who are gone.
Hmm.
And then just to have that like written out, it feels good to get that out because it's not like you can say it to their face exactly. So to be able to be like addressing it to them and like putting those feelings as if you were talking to them can be very therapeutic for some people, and that's something that's helped me. The other thing
Yeah.
that's helped me is doing little things in memory of them. So for example, one of the things my mom and I haven't gotten to do yet, but will do at some point, is we've talked about creating like a little memorial in our backyard for like my aunt and my cousin.
Oh, that's
And just
sweet.
kind of having like maybe like a bird bath there or something, and just like really kind of
Yeah.
dressing it up, but making it so that like when we did it in honor of them. And you can do that in like little ways too. Like you can just go get their favorite flowers and maybe plant them, or just something like
Yeah.
that. Do something in memory of them that makes you feel good. Another thing that I like to do, because my cousin and I like to do it a lot, was we would just like pick a random YouTube playlist um, of like just like I guess it was like considered like punk pop at the time music that she'd like to listen to, and we would just sit there and like laugh at the lyrics or whatever. So sometimes when I'm really like in my feels about her, I will totally just listen to that music and just kind of reminisce on that. So yeah, so if you create little routines or little rituals that make you feel better about it, that can be helpful as well.
Yeah,
So yeah.
that's great. I love that.
So I don't know. It's obviously this is like a heavier topic that we've decided to talk about today.
It is. It is a heavy topic. Before we wrap it up, though, I have one little story that I would love to tell, just because I think it
Sure.
is really fun and funny, and it is on the topic of death and funerals, and but it's a good story.
Okay, let's hear it.
I don't think I've told you. So
Okay.
my grandpa passed away in January. We were expecting it. It was coming for a while. So we had all felt pretty, among the cousins especially, we had felt pretty okay. Obviously the adults, like his kids especially, were very much still processing it at the funeral. Or I guess rather, this was the wake. So for the wake, we met together as a family beforehand and decided to have, like, family time together, with the open casket before we let in guests. And it was very nice. There was a small, like a, not a mass, but like a prayer
Service.
service.
Yeah.
And then we played a PowerPoint that had all these photos of my grandpa growing up and all of us with him. And one of the songs was like a really sweet Christian song, something about an angel, and it was very nice. It was a good mood.
Oh
So
boy.
then, so then, um, the adults had put together a playlist of songs that would play for, like, during the mass. I should have said this beforehand because I'm gonna give it away now, but um, my grandpa's favorite. My grandpa loved theater, and he loved coming to see us in theater. And he saw me in this show one time, but his favorite show, his favorite musical of all time, hands down, is Guys and Dolls.
Oh boy.
So the adults put together a collection of songs that they thought would be nice to play at the wake, and I think the idea was, his favorite songs.
Oh boy.
And the idea was very, very sweet. However, the way it played out is, we were finishing the slideshow played, and it was really sentimental, all these sweet pictures of family with grandpa and him growing up
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. And it stops playing. It's silent, and we're having like a moment of silence, and the person running the funeral home had said, "We're going to give you all one more minute of silence, and then if it's okay, we are going to start letting people in, and we will play the previously selected music." And everyone's like, "Okay," and all the adults are hugging, and after a minute, they're like, "We're going to start letting people in now." And we're like, "Okay, thank you." We
Oh
let
no.
people in. People begin trickling in, very sad because they are just now arriving to see, like, this open casket. And what starts playing on the speakers? "I got the horse right here. His name is Paul Revere. Da 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 again too." And it was. I thought we were on a prank show. We all sat there. All the cousins are just looking at each other like, "What's
What's
happening
happening?
right now?" And then the adults, I say the adults, we're all adults,
I
but
know, right? I was gonna
his kid,
bring that
my
up.
my parents, that generation, it just kind of, I think they just hadn't thought of it until that moment, how much of a clash of tone that would be. People are starting to just
Dwight.
say goodbyes. They're kneeling down and they're praying. And
Oh my
Guys and
god.
Dolls is just blaring through the
Oh my
speakers. And
god.
it was, listen, it's horrible, I think, to say that was the funniest. It was just the most
Oh my God.
Funerals are just the most serious circumstances of all time.
Yes.
And so anything that's like a little bit funny is like really not supposed to be.
Like,
And that just
really
amplifies how
inappropriate.
much
Yeah.
worse it was. Like the younger cousins, we were looking at them and we were like, guys, hold it together. Just please. We know. I know. But just don't laugh in their faces, please. And my mom was like, oh, this was his favorite song. Just the looks, you should have seen the looks on people's
I
faces
can
as they're
only
walking
imagine.
in,
Like,
just crying, and also just like, what? Like,
that's horrible.
it was terrible for sure. Totally innocent. Like no one was in any kind of fault here.
Yeah.
But wow, I will never ever
You'll never forget
that.
Yeah.
And the service was beautiful. Besides that, I'm cherry picking the one funny example from. It wasn't like it wasn't like that the whole time.
Right.
It was just
that moment specifically.
Yeah, but honestly, the rest of it was another situation where it was a very positive environment because this was this
It changed like the tone. Yeah.
Yeah, well, but also because this was this past winter, and
Oh
so
yeah.
I haven't seen most of my family since
Mm-hmm.
COVID has started, and so it was like I had like my aunt would come up to me and be like, "Crappy circumstances, but it's so nice to see you."
Yeah, I
And
know.
I was like, "You too,"
Yeah.
and yeah, it's very strange the emotions that come up
It came
as a
from that.
result that come from that, and that come from grief, and from
Yeah.
mourning, and man, it's just all really really weird, and a lot of the time I think it feels super inappropriate, and like I think most people are always contemplating, am I feeling the right thing in
Yeah.
regards to this, and the answer across the board is yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Yes,
Absolutely.
it's all valid. All of your feelings, every single one of them
Absolutely.
is for a reason, and you just got to feel it out, and it's okay, whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is.
So I'd say for our wrap up for today.
Yeah.
Number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Can you guess what it is?
I think it's maybe gonna be to pet a dog.
Pet some dogs.
Pet a dog. Find a dog.
Pet a dog. Pet some dogs.
Yeah.
That is rule number 1. Always. That's
Please.
a wrap up.
Yeah.
I hope you got that
Yep.
from listening to this entire heavy episode. Is to pet a dog. That was the message.
It's not gonna stop. Pet a dog every day, all day.
So pet a dog. 2, you're not alone.
No,
if you need help, there are many resources for you, in which we will make sure to link in the description of this episode.
Absolutely.
And then also, your feelings are valid.
Every one of them.
Every single one of your feelings are valid.
Completely valid.
And to anybody who has lost anyone in their life in any way, shape, or form and has experienced this, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that this episode maybe gave you some comfort knowing that you really aren't alone. And we all have some stuff that we've been through in regards to this.
And you are doing a great job.
Yes.
You are doing such a good job. Look at you.
You're getting up
here
today.
And that's a success. You're listening to our podcast, and that's not easy.
Yeah, I know. I don't know how you made it this far, but thank you.
Oh, and as a last piece of advice to recap,
yes.
If you're a person that is a source of support to someone who is going through grief, remember, open the door.
Yes.
Don't let yourself in.
Correct.
Give the person the knowledge that they can reach out with whatever they need, but don't demand that they have to need something.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Our next episode won't be so heavy.
No, we got some fun stuff planned.
Yes.
We'll make it a little lighter.
It's just, important to talk about this stuff. So
yeah, I got to get to it eventually.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. We love you all.
Love you so much.
And we will see you next time on Ep.106. Goodbye, everyone. Cool. Okay, are we happy?